All right, everybody. So welcome. Again, my name is Chris Bladon, and I'm a senior solution architect for AWS. If you don't know me, my email address is there. What we're going to talk about today is just a really kind of light overview of AWS Glue and and just what that is and how you could put that to use today if you wanted to, and for your existing ETL ETL pipelines and ETL purposes. So just what is AWS Glue? It's a serverless data integration service, and it allows you to easily discover, prepare, and combine data for analytics, machine learning, and application development. Think in terms of if you've ever used SSIS, the Microsoft integration product that's also part of SSRS reporting services. In those cases, it's in SSIS you've got your the ability to develop little ETL programs. Basically, in SSIS you're kind of like actually writing code. Or if you've ever used something like Talent or Informatica or SciSense, any of these things like this, these are all this is a comparable service offering on AWS, and one of its cool aspects of it is that it's serverless and it's also easily scalable, auto-scalable, in fact. But we'll see a little bit more of that. And as I kind of, I'm just going to kind of run through a presentation here where we kind of talk about it, but then I'm also going to show you what it looks like in the AWS console, just so you can see how you would actually proceed to do this on your own. Okay, so at the kind of start of all, or at the kind of core of all this, I guess is the way to put it. You've got S3 as a kind of formation for your kind of modern data architecture when it comes to using AWS Glue. And so AWS Glue is just a piece of that modern architecture, and it's a tool that you can use to get data into and out of your data lake architecture here. So in the middle here, you can see shows Amazon S3 that customers have been building on S3 for ages, and you may not have ever thought that S3 can actually be the foundation for your data lake. So already the data that you've already got in S3 can already start providing that even today. It allows you to kind of start looking at your data in in various formats, so various like structures of data. It allows you to kind of start thinking of those as instead of just being files dumped into your S3 buckets, now you can start thinking of that data as actual data that you can actually query and harvest and ETL and transform, all that kind of stuff. So there's just kind of like a new way of looking at your your existing data assets that you have. You can see here it shows in the middle here AWS Lake Formation. Lake Formation is another AWS service that I'll kind of hint on here, but I'm not going to go into too much detail. But it's really like a governance and sort of maintenance security wrapper around your data lake architecture, and then AWS Glue here at the bottom as the service that's able to ingest and transform and output data
Sorry, Bladon.
into this. Oh, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you right here. It looks like you are sharing the wrong screen because where the slide is kind of small with the other slides.
Oh, so you can see my notes.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, sorry.
You're entirely right. If you can switch that.
Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, that's what I.
Sorry to interrupt you. It was just kind of small. We were not able to see it.
I'm totally sorry. Yeah, that's. I asked that in the beginning, but I obviously I didn't ask it the right way, I think. Okay. What about this one? How about this one?
That is perfect. Now we
can
see
better?
the slides.
I'm so sorry about that.
No,
yeah, I can't tell. Yeah, the problem is, it's funny when I share my screen in Zoom. Zoom doesn't tell you which screen it's sharing, so I actually can't see what I'm sharing. This actually is the same case in Chime too. We have the same problem in Chime. Anyway, I'm glad you spoke up, because that's that'd be really hard to read all that.
Yeah, thank you.
So the last part of the data lake architecture that I was going to bring up here is that, as you can see, the data lake S3 in the middle here, that forms the core of your data lake. So you're landing files into S3 in various formats, typically CSV, JSON, Parquet, formats like that. Then you can push or pull that data out of your S3 data lake using Athena or other query mechanisms, or other data movement mechanisms, in order to push that data or pull that data, like I said, into one of these like surrounding sort of downstream targets or consumers of that data. So here on the we're showing EMR. You can move the data into Aurora, RDS, DynamoDB, Redshift, and in the lower right here, you can train and run machine learning models as well. So and you're also kind of seeing here in this data lake architecture, not only can data be pulled from your data lake in the middle, but it can also move around the outside. So that's what these arrows are kind of moving here, between, say, Amazon DynamoDB and SageMaker. So you can actually move data around that way. But the kind of focus here then is just the ability to, again, land the data in S3 as the kind of starting point and the kind of centralizing point of your data lake architecture. Okay, so we're going to look at just what are the things that the sort of basic pieces of why do people use AWS Glue, or why are customers going to AWS Glue? It's serverless, like I said, so that means you're not running Glue servers or anything like that. They fire up on kind of a provisioned approach, so it's serverless, but you are having some ability to control how much power you throw at those jobs. It has different personas for using AWS Glue, so that translates to different skill sets. So you've got a visual environment for say data engineers, that's the Glue Studio. You've got notebook style development if you're a data scientist and you want full aspect to coding, so in a notebook style code paradigm. You can actually also program in just a regular IDE as well, and there's a purely no code environment for data analysis, or for data analysts who don't want to have any kind of coding. That's called Data Brew. So we got a Glue Data Brew. So there's lots of options here depending on what your kind of level and comfort with coding is, really, and how visual you want to be when you're building and manipulating jobs. And on that note, this is always one of my complaints about how SSIS worked. It has kind of like a visual interface to it, but really you're just moving blocks around, and ultimately in SSIS you almost always have to fall back to writing code. So that's always like it's always frustrating when you're trying to put some of these tools for ETL in the hands of people to do ETL, but then they don't have the strongest coding skills. So this is, in this particular case, for Glue, we have the ability to put it in the hands of people who don't have high coding skills, but then it can grow very easily as your team or as your skill set increases. You can build up to a full code option to it if you want to. It's got a very simple pricing model, so it's not based on licenses or anything like that. It's just it's kind of like the typical AWS pay-as-you-go model. It's 50% cheaper than other cloud integration options out there. Handles very complex workloads. It's got lots of data source connectors to third-party applications like Salesforce and things like that. And it has the benefit of being based on open source tooling like Spark and Python, things like that, to prevent to buffer you too much from vendor lock-in around AWS. So the code that you develop in it will, since it's basically Spark code, Apache Spark, it'll run on any Apache Spark platform. So just some kind of things, how people are tending to use AWS Glue, and these are, really, these are just the typical workloads, I guess, for ETL, really. But like we talked about in the beginning, obviously building out data lakes and lake houses for feeding and housing your data for a scalable data analytics platform, and data pipeline and things like that. Migrating from an expensive traditional, especially on-prem ETL solution, in order to get flexibility, and then also to reduce those costs, especially in terms of licensing costs, especially. And because it's more of a pay-as-you-go model now. If if you've only got an ETL job that runs once a day, or is running once a week or something like that, even, then this is a really, really super cost-effective thing, as opposed to using more traditional license-based approaches where you're spending a lot of money on a license that you're barely ever using. It has built-in data cataloging, which is really, really super nice. So that allows you to build data catalogs and use those data catalogs across all of your components in your ETL pipeline that are importing or using that data. So you have a consistent data schema over the top of your data, and you can augment and document that data schema. It processes a huge amount of data, again, using Apache Spark. And I'm not really going to go too much into the Spark side of it, but if you're interested in Spark, it's an open source library, lots of information out there on it. And last but not least, preparing data for machine learning. So if you're importing data from another, an external system, or from IoT devices or anything like that, you can bring that data in, and then you use that data to train and run your machine learning models. So super, super flexible here. So the components are kind of across the breadth of the data integration space. You can see here the data processing engines, the ability to connect to data from different sources, like I said, cataloging and governance and data management, and then the operational aspects of running an ETL pipeline. At the core is the AWS Glue serverless engines, and that, like I said, is kind of based on Apache Spark, but you can actually bring in other libraries as well. In fact, there are lots of Spark libraries just in themselves that you can bring in and use, which is also super cool. So as any Apache Spark library, basically, you can use as well. The engines have they provide scale and performance to handle most of the use cases that you could throw at it from an ETL standpoint. So whether you've got really, really large scale batch jobs, or just tiny, tiny little micro batch jobs, or data streaming jobs where you're just streaming data in on an event basis, you can even do that. And like I said, machine learning and data processing. AWS Glue, it has hundreds of data connectors into other upstream data or downstream data stores or upstream data sources, including Amazon Redshift, all the relational databases, RDS especially, but any relational database really. MongoDB SaaS providers such as Salesforce and other ones. It's also built on APIs, so you can integrate in your code. If you're building with code, you can integrate with those REST APIs really easily to build your own connectors or to build your own special functionality. Using its data cataloging features, it provides automated schema discovery, fine-grained permissions over that data, and comprehensive metadata management in order to help make sense of all your data assets. So that kind of, if you think about it, because you've got data dropped into S3, this ability to kind of catalog and capture the metadata associated with that, and then provide security over top of that data gets kind of important. So you can, and this is what I talked about before, using lake formations. This also gives you the ability to control the security of that data in S3, even down to the row level. So here's just an example kind of a modern data architecture using Glue with the different architectural components of Glue. And these are, typically things that you'd kind of use in your data integration journey. On the left, you've got disparate data sources, streaming data, RDS shown here, other kinds of databases. You can use the Glue connectors to connect those data sets really, really easily to your data, and the ability to land that data into your S3 landing zone. Once the data is in the landing zone, you can use crawlers to discover the complex schemas in that data, and then catalog those assets in the centralized Glue data catalog. If your organization, like we had talked about, if your organization has data engineers who want to build in a visual way, you can use Glue Studio, which is what I'm going to show you. If you've got data engineers who love to code, they can use Glue Studio notebooks. That's if you're used to the notebook paradigm, that's where you kind of have little snippets of code in a notebook and you can execute them. They're kind of like half visually, half non-visually. If they prefer to bring their IDE of choice, they can use that and use their IDE to develop Glue jobs as well. And if you've got, and then like I said, if you've got business analysts who prefer just to have a no-code interface, then that's what Glue Data Brew is for. Once your data lands into this curated data lake, in any case, then you can use AWS Glue jobs for that purpose to build all the downstream assets in the data stores like we showed before. So here's just like a simplified version of that. It's kind of the same picture here, but you upload data into S3, you transform it with AWS Glue, and you might be combining data there for doing joins or unions or the like out of say Aurora. Everything, of course, like in AWS, everything can be monitored via CloudWatch. So that lets you kind of see the logs and how things are working, or it gives you the ability to debug your jobs. And then you can load that data as transformed out of Glue and load that into your data warehouse or your analytics databases, star schemas, things like that, and then run your business intelligence reporting layer, QuickSight, Tableau, Power BI, things like that. And this is really the very similar a chart here, but I just wanted to show you can kind of see a picture of what using a sort of a Zeppelin notebook up here at the top, but you can see the kind of use of AWS Glue in the processing of data for AI and ML workloads. So that's what they're trying to show here. And the use of the catalog here to capture the metadata and the schema and things like that associated with your data as it's being transformed. So again, just kind of like a recap of the kind of modernization here. Historically, ETL systems historically they're difficult to scale, they're expensive to license, you get vendor lock-in almost all the time, the total cost of ownership is high. It's really difficult to because of the architecture and the way that they're built, it's difficult to tune and manage the clusters in an ETL environment. You kind of get this code lock-in around the library, so the code itself that you develop is difficult to migrate off. You have to, in an on-prem world, you have to provision all that infrastructure in advance, and you've obviously got the licensing cost that goes with it. So Glue is, just hit on some of the features here. Glue is way cheaper. They're saying 7 times 7 times cheaper compared to on-prem options. No no code or licensing or vendor lock-in here. You get they're saying 5 times cheaper than setting up your own Spark cluster. And if you've ever tried that, setting up Spark clusters are a little bit difficult to do. So this is easy because this is all just kind of the Spark clustering is all set up for you, and reduces all that undifferentiated heavy lifting of maintaining and managing your own Spark clusters, which is a big pain. And then last but not least, it's a serverless offering, so you're not managing infrastructure, and again, the undifferentiated heavy lifting that you now don't have to worry about. This is kind of what the 3 different options that kind of was talking about, where I just wanted to show you what that looked like. In Glue Studio, which we're about to see, you get this kind of block diagram, kind of like a workflow editor almost. In the notebook version, where you're preferring to write codes in notebooks, you got a notebook view. So this is like, if you've ever seen how notebooks look, up there you've got code and you can actually see the results, and it's got the ability to draw little inline graphs and visualizations in line with the notebook. So if you've never played around with notebooks, you should definitely give it a try. This is a good place to start. There are other areas in AWS that use the notebook paradigm. EMR is one of them. SageMaker is one of them. So it's definitely a really, really cool way to kind of even learn how to program if you're not if you want to learn programming. This can be kind of a good way to do it. But I'm sorry, but if you're an expert programmer, this also gives you the full set of capabilities around building ETL pipelines. And then, I'm sorry, I'm coughing here. Last but not least, Glue Data Brew, which is for those who prefer absolutely no code. And in this case, you can see it gives you a visual interface to transforming and prepping data for downstream analytics. Some of the transforms that you can do, that I just thought was that this was interesting in Glue Studio. So you've got the obvious things like you can select fields out of the data set. You can drop fields, you can drop duplicates, you do joins, unions, filters, aggregates, etc. Kind of like how you would typically think of doing those very same things in SQL. It's a very similar paradigm. It gives you the transformations via Spark and programming in Python and Scala. And like I said before, you can apply machine learning based transformations and algorithms here, like to detect if you want to do PHI, PII detection, filling in missing values or detecting duplicates and things like that. So I want to talk just briefly about the auto scaling. This really applies to auto scaling in general, but when you build out your when you're building out any kind of cluster, if you have to provision that cluster, in this case, in an ETL environment, if you've got to build that cluster out and have it be fixed provision, you're obviously spending all that money. That's what this big yellow rectangle is. That's all the money over time that you're spending here. With auto scaling, the beauty is that the cluster is actually spinning up and down to accommodate or to process your ETL workloads as fast as possible. And so all this yellow part here with autoscaling, you're not paying for all of that yellow part. So you're just paying for the parts of the processing that you're using. Again, this is just the side effect of autoscaling that applies also out to EC2 or anything else in AWS that uses autoscaling. So so super handy for getting the performance that you're asking out of the system or that you need, but where you're not paying for it when it's not running. There's a new option even in Glue. It's called Flex, and that's a similar concept to autoscaling. I'm not going to talk about that, but it's something you can look at. And Flex has the ability. I think there's another. Oh no, okay, no. What Flex is for is it's kind of like the analogous compute clustering environment to AWS Spot EC2 instances, if you're used to that. So Flex uses spare capacity in the AWS compute environment so that you get really you get highly reduced costs from using that spare capacity. So you would tend to use this when for non-critical pre-production jobs, testing, one-time data loads, things like that, where you're not requiring on it to run on a very quick instantaneous event-based or a job window or anything like that, where you're wanting to make sure that those things run as they happen. So this is just another ability for you to reduce your costs. And as always, we have blogs, documentation, and online workshops for you that's available for you to learn more as you go. And with that, I'm going to switch over to our demo here. And the demo is actually pretty easy. I hope I can do it in the time. If I may run out of time here, but so we'll see actually see how fast I can do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just show you what it looks like. And before I do that, I'm going to paste into here. Hold on a second. So I'm going to share my screen again, just make sure that I'm sharing the right screen. Everybody should see at the top of the page, you should see something that says tutorial getting started with AWS Glue Studio. So this tutorial I'm going to run through is available for you to look at. It's just part of the AWS Glue Studio documentation. You can see that over here on the left-hand side says AWS Glue Studio, and the third topic right below it says tutorial getting started. So I'm just going to run through this actual tutorial just to show you what that looks like. This is really easy to do. There's a couple little gotchas in there I'm going to show you that I don't think they included in here, but we'll see. The first part of this is you obviously need an AWS account to do this in, but if you do, if you start one up, I don't know. I'm not sure how much this would cost if you just started up an account and wanted to play with this, but this is what we're going to do. And I am going to, that's what I was going to do. I'm going to paste this into the chat here just so we can, y'all can have this if you want to follow along. So that's the tutorial. And the very first part of this tutorial is starting out with launching a CloudFormation stack, and that's just going to set up and upload some data into S3 just to kind of give us a kind of bootstrap data source that we're going to do. So I'm going to push that button, that launch stack thing. I'm going to come into my account here. So it's by pushing that launch thing, it launches the CloudFormation a template in my browser, and it's just going to take me right over here into my console. So now I'm in my AWS console. I can change the name of this job. I'm just going to leave it. I'm just going to leave it as that. And basically all I have to do here is acknowledge that it might create some IAM resources, and I'm going to hit create stack, the orange button. That's kind of a funny thing in AWS that I always talk about. In a lot of cases, the orange button, they've done a good job of making the buttons orange, which are very typically the button you want to push. So it kind of stands out. So if you ever see an orange button, look over there because it's probably the thing you want to push at the time. So right now we're just creating that stack, and I'm going to hit update here, and you'll see that it's just doing a bunch of creations in my environment. And this thing will not take long to run. But what it's doing, as you can see, it's uploading some data into S3, and it's creating those buckets, and it's creating some IAM permission rules. But that's all it's really going to do. And then I'm going to go in, and I'm going to create my job in order to take advantage of that here, and I'll show you what that looks like as soon as this is done. Okay, so it looks like it's done. And you can see that here, it shows the status in CloudFormation. I didn't really explain what CloudFormation is, but it's just a templated approach to spin up resources and to configure your AWS resources in kind of like, not really like a script, it's like a template. But anyway, I think we've actually had a talk here on CloudFormation in the past. I'm going to go over here really fast to S3, and I'm going to show you what just one thing it created. Down here at the bottom, it is the Glue Studio blog. It created this bucket right here, and it also created another bucket here. That's somewhere. I'm not seeing it here just for a second, but it created another bucket somewhere. Anyway, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go over to Glue. Now you can get over to the Glue console by either searching for it in this like drop down, which is hard to do. You can see it's right there actually. But usually what I do is I usually just type up here, and that gets me to the thing the fastest. In the console, you can push the little favorite star button, and that will stick it up here in this little toolbar right here for you. So I typically do that as I'm working on things, and then I'll unfavorite things depending on what I'm working with. So I favorited that, but we're going to go over to the Glue console. You can see that here are the things that I've kind of favorited here right now. And so I'm going to go to Glue Studio here, and I'm just going to push. I've actually got here's the one I've already developed, but I'm going to develop a new one here just for our purposes. So I'm going to do it with a visual source and target. These are just kind of templates that you can use if you want to just kind of kick things off really fast with these templates. I'm going to use the source as an S3 bucket and the target as an S3 bucket. So that's just an easy way to just do a really easy ETL operation, bringing data in and then ETLing it, doing some transformation and writing it back out to an S3 bucket. So I'm going to hit the orange create button because I'm just going to leave it exactly how it is. And you can see here that it just gives us like a kind of this kind of templated approach to our ETL thing, our ETL visual job. And if I click on each of these, if I click on any of these nodes in our job, it gives us different different property and different parameters to put in for each of these things. This first one is the source of our data, and so I'm gonna click on node properties. I'm just gonna change this to I think I'm going to call it ticket source or something like that. We're going to use data that was uploaded. That's I think it's Toronto parking tickets is what this actual data is. Oops, sorry, I've got my thing just went off here. Hold on a second here. It just got interrupted. Okay, here we go. Yeah, so parking tickets. Wait, hold on a second. Wait, just rats. Hang on. I'm in the wrong thing here.
Not I'm aware of, no, because it was supposed to show up last week while I was out.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes, I did.
Okay. We're still without. Should I open a ticket for it or what?
Yeah. So I'm gonna I'm gonna put as the data source. I'm gonna choose the database that I want to choose, and it's going to be this YYZ tickets at data source that CloudFormation script created. And then I'm going to choose a table. I'm just going to choose tickets as my data source, and then the output schema. We can see what that output schema is going to look like. So this is really just going to be the thing that's going to grab the data and feed it to this transformation map. So let's go to that thing now and look at what that has to offer. And you can see it's going to do what's called an apply mapping. So it's just going to do a mapping. And this is where you can do some transformation on the data, some kind of basic transformation on the data. So one of the things that you can do, you can drop columns from the data set. So I'm going to do that just as part of the tutorial here. So this means we're not interested in these parameters. So I'm just going to drop these out of the data set. That means it's the ones that are not dropped are going to are going to go on to the onto the next node, but these that I'm dropped will be dropped out of the data set. And I can actually, you can see I can actually change the schema here if I want to. So for example, I can change this to officer name, for example, instead of officer. I think that's what they, I'm trying to remember all the transformations that they do in the actual tutorial. So I'm not sure I'm going to do all of them, but and then you can change, if you want to, you can change the data type of the data here. So for example, I've got set fine amount. Like I can change this ticket number right here. I can change this from a decimal to, I can change it to a float or something. I think that's what they have in the tutorial. And I think they even changed this one maybe to a float too. I'm not sure. But so that sets the, so again, you have ability to control the output, and you could do basic kind of mapping and on the data in this, and now this shows you the output schema that you're going to have. And now I'm going to click on this last bucket here, and I'm going to change the output format that we're going to do to Parquet and gzip, just because that's a handy, nice, convenient, low-cost format to choose. And then it's asking me to choose the target location for the data, and so I'm going to use this handy browse feature here to browse the output forms, and I'm going to put it in. Let's see. I'm going to search for Glue here. I'm just going to put it in this bucket that CloudFormation script created for me, but you can put it in any bucket. This is just the output that you're going to put the data in. So, okay, so now we've got our little pipeline set up. It's not going to do a huge amount of stuff, but it does it does some basics here, oh, and it's telling me here that it wants, I think it wants me to name the job. Here's what it wants to do. So I'll call it Glue Demo Job here. And let's see if it's going to let me. Oh, okay. Yes. See, so the red little thing over here is telling me, and it wants some more information here. So what it's asking me here is it wants an IAM role to use while the job is running. So what this means is the job is not going to run as my user. It's going to run as its own kind of role in the system. So it needs an IAM role granted to it to give it the permission, because it's going to be running separately from me on a schedule or event driven or whatever. It needs that role to grant it permission to operate on its own. And so again, the CloudFormation script has created a role for me. So I'm going to choose the one that it's created, this AWS Glue Studio role. If there's time, I can show you what that actually looks like in IAM, but it's not too exciting. I think everything else I'm just going to accept. Let me just look really fast here if there's anything else that we want to do. Here's where you would automatically scale number of workers. I'm not going to do that. Oh, and it's got, I wonder if I have to actually do this. I actually don't know. I'm not sure exactly what this problem is right here, but it's probably that I already have this. So I'm going to call this demo glue PyJob. There we go. And that's going to be it. So I'm going to save our job and see if we get a clear save here. Looks like we got a good save. That's good. And let me go back over to the visual part. And now we're basically ready to run. Now I happen to know that this is not going to run. It's going to end up in an error, but I just wanted to show you what that actually looks like. So I'm going to run it, and we're going to kick it off here. And it says we can navigate to run details from our detail. So I'm going to do that. And you can see the status here is running. If we wanted to, we could go over here. It just gives us a link to go over to CloudWatch. If this are a long running job, we could go over to CloudWatch and see CloudWatch logs, or we can see the CloudWatch graphs of performance and things like that if we wanted to see how it's performing. and how much processing and memory and things like that that the job is using. Okay, so it came back with an error here, and the error is that it has insufficient lake formation permission to access the or the job has insufficient lake formation access. Now, and so this is a pretty techie little problem here, and I just wanted to show you kind of like what it looked like when it failed. I'm going to go over and fix this problem just to show you what it looks like, and I'll show you what the actual problem is. So again, I'm just going to type formation here. Whoops, formation. To go over to CloudFormation, I'll go over there. Whoops, and rats. Okay, so go over to CloudFormation, and I'm going to show you on our tickets database. This is this thing. This is a database that was created, a database table that's a wrapper that CloudFormation created as a wrapper around that input data that we put into our that the CloudFormation script put in. And what I noticed in here is that it does not have. Let me see if I can find how to show you this. It doesn't have. It's not allowing access to our Glue job because of a role. So what we have to do is we have to grant access to this table for our job. So what I'm going to do is go into this grant place. I'm going to choose our Glue role that we had given to our job, and now what that's going to do, it's going to grant this role access to this table that we created, and I'm going to give it access to all the tables, and I'll just give it well, for sake of argument here, I'm just going to give all the permissions, the super permissions. You don't have to do this, but I'm doing it just for convenience. And now what this is really ultimately going to do is it's going to grant access to our job now to access this table is really what's happening. So now I'm going to go back to AWS Glue and go to our jobs over here on the left. And I'm going to pick the one that we just created, which is this one right here, this Glue demo job. And I'm going to run this thing. And now we should, oh, okay, whoops. Okay, so we got another problem now, and that is that I failed to, hold on, I failed to stop this job before. So the job that was actually running, you can see right here, it's actually still running, and I'm not exactly sure why. I could have configured this not to do this, but you'll see that the job is like still running. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop everything just so that it's clear that we've got it all stopped. And what I've noticed is when you stop jobs, you have to really wait until the job status says that it's stopped. So you can see it's like stopping. And so just for giggles, I'm going to do this actually. I'm going to go back to our job details and just show you that we can actually adjust the number of concurrent jobs that can run at the same time. You see this maximum concurrency. It's set to 1, so that makes it so that I can only run one parallel version of this job at a time. I mean, I'm just going to set this to 2, and it'll let us just run the it'll let us run it 2 like multiple concurrent versions of the job. It just makes it easier. Now there's some potential conflict that you can get in with having overrunning jobs, but in our case, we're not going to care too much about this. I'm going to go back to runs. You can see it still says it's stopping, but because I set the concurrency up to 2 now, I can actually run another job now. And so I'm going to push run, and now it's going to say that it's running here. So now I've got, and it looks like it's actually stopped the other one, so I probably didn't need to do that. But anyway, so now that our job is running, I'm fairly confident we're getting close on time, so I don't want to wait too much. I don't want to wait too long, but my my anticipation is that this job will run and complete while we're sitting here. And so while we're doing that, let me just kind of wrap up and say what we just went through. What I did is I loaded a CloudFormation script, like I said, that that kind of set the data up that I needed, the kind of data, the files that were uploaded into S3. It converted those files using lake formation, converted those into database tables that we could actually query. And I didn't talk about Amazon Athena, but that's another ability that you have to query actual just flat file data sources that are sitting in S3 directly. So Athena is definitely a really, really cool feature to look at, because you don't even have to put your data into a database. It can just be queried as SQL right out of S3. But so we created that CloudFormation script, set everything up for us. Then I created our job, which looks like this. I went through and I set up the source of that data to pull data from that data that was set up in the CloudFormation script. I applied a really simple mapping here with by just changing some of the schema, some of the data types, and then I dropped some of the columns here. And then I output the data in a Parquet format using a compression of gzip out to this S3 bucket. And you can see here now that our job succeeded while I was sitting here talking. So basically, this is a really simple version of an ETL pipeline. And instead, you can see here that it gives you the option of actually pulling data from other kinds of data sources, but typically, like you're looking at here, in this particular case, this is a node that's pulling from an S3 location from a data catalog table, but you can pull from anything. You can pull from relational database, and like we talked about, it can pull data from SaaS offerings like Salesforce or PeopleSoft, all kinds of sources you can pull data from, and this is and so you can bring data into your data warehouse, and then you can process that data and push it out to your analytics or data warehousing in order to then build visualizations on that. And with that, I am going to end, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to respond. But I hope this is like informative. I know it's kind of quick, but I encourage everybody to go out there, just take a stab at data glue, take a look at it. It's pretty fun and easy to build with. And if you're used to, and like I said, if you're used to SSIS, super easy. It'll make a lot of sense to you.